Hi, so welcome to your trial lesson for the iGCSE with South West Science School. This is a biology one, but the same format will apply to all the GCSEs. Each week you'll receive a lesson just like this one in the form of a PowerPoint with audio, and it will cover absolutely everything that you need to pass this GCSE with top marks. Every week you'll also get an assignment sheet. I like to put quite a few assignments on, but you can do as many or as few as you like. But obviously the more you do, the better chance you're going to have of getting that good grade. As we move through the lesson, as we move through the course, I'll also be posting loads of tips and videos and activities on our Facebook account to help you with what you're doing in that particular week. So this trial lesson is designed to give you an idea of what a typical week will be like for you for workload. If you did it over 2 years, that's 2 school years, so including school holidays. So if you think you want to do it over 1 year, then you're going to be doubling what I'm going to be saying today. I try to apply every topic to something engaging, something that you might already find enjoyable. This one is Star Wars, but we cover Jurassic Park, Breaking Bad, My Little Pony, X-Men, all sorts. But hopefully within the hour-ish, you may be able to tell me how to clone your own army, like the Clone Wars in Star Wars. Right, so a clone is something that's genetically identical to something else. It has exactly the same DNA. You are not a clone of your parents because you're a mixture of them. You're half your mom and half your dad. Clones are not like this. They are identical to each other, and they do exist in nature. A really easy one that you'd probably remember is an identical twin. You could definitely say that they're a clone because by definition they are genetically identical. They have exactly the same DNA. But in science, when we talk about cloning, we aren't often talking about twins. We're talking about taking, for example, you and making a copy of you, a genetically identical copy of you, another you with exactly the same DNA. So if I made a clone of you, this would be a pretty unique human. It would have one parent, you. And because this would only have you as his mum or dad, we say it's produced asexually. And that's the scientist's fancy word for saying you have one parent. So a clone for your GCSE is something genetically identical with one parent. And because it's got one parent, we know that it's produced asexually. Right, I'm going to spend some time on this because for your GCSE, for your iGCSE, you're going to need to know 4 things like the back of your hand. Number 1, a clone has one parent. Number 2, it will be genetically identical to that parent. It'll have the same DNA. Number 3, because of this, it will be made by asexual reproduction. And number 4, it will be made from one diploid cell. Right, let's break that down. I know some of you will already know this, but there really is no harm in hearing it again. Normally, a mammal is produced by sexual reproduction. You get half your DNA from your mum and half from your dad. We say that you get a haploid cell from your mum and a haploid cell from your dad. The haploid cell from your mum was the egg, and the haploid from your dad was the sperm. The problem is, a clone needs all the DNA from one parent. So a haploid cell's pretty useless. It only has half the DNA that it needs. It needs a diploid cell, a cell with all the DNA to make a human. Now, to be honest, as far as you're concerned, all the cells in your body, bar the eggs or the sperm, depending on if you're a boy or a girl, man or a woman, are diploid. All your cells are diploid. The cells in your face, your cheek, your fingers, they're diploid. They contain all the genetic material that makes you, all the DNA. So making a clone baby should be easy. Now, this is a topic that is quite advanced. It normally comes at the end of a GCSE, so if you follow me to the end of this and you complete some of the assignments, you should give yourself a real big pat on the back. Right, now we know a clone is something genetically identical to something else, normally its parent. And when we say genetically identical, we mean it has the same DNA. You've probably heard loads about DNA. DNA is basically the instructions to make a living thing, like a recipe to make you. And DNA, it chills out in a place in a cell called a nucleus. This is a pretty epic fact because your whole body is made of cells. Every living thing, its whole body is made of cells. So in your body right now, there are about 37 trillion complete copies of your DNA. In the eyes of a clone scientist, you're practically a walking instruction manual to replicate yourself. So to refresh, your whole body is made of diploid cells. Don't worry, we'll go over this loads in the earlier lessons if you take the course. Inside each diploid cell is a nucleus, which holds a copy of all your DNA. And the nucleus, it's like a protective bag for the DNA. If you look at the diagram on the slide right now, next to the organism to the right, you'll see an example of a cell. It's a really simplified drawing, but essentially the nucleus is that white circle in the middle with the chromosomes inside, the DNA, the protective bag for the DNA. And this is really important because if you want to make a clone of anything, you're going to need a full set of instructions, a full set of DNA. So you're going to need one of these diploid cells. And remember the difference. You don't want a haploid cell. You don't want an egg or a sperm. They only have half the DNA you need to make you, to make a clone. We've already cloned loads of animals. I know that sounds blasé, but we really have. We're doing it all the time in science research. Frogs, mice, rats, cows, dogs, cats, you name it, it's probably been cloned already. But it really wasn't always like this. Back in the 1990s, the most famous clone ever created was born. She was a sheep and she was called Dolly. Dolly caused a worldwide meltdown, and ever since we have been going cloning crazy. But she did cause a lot of fear for people. People thought that human clones would be next, and to be honest, they were right. We definitely have the skills to create clone humans now. But because of Dolly and because of this fear, a lot of laws were put in place to stop this from happening. The reason that she remains famous now and the reason that you have to learn about her in your iGCSE is because we still use the same method to clone mammals now as we did to clone her. And it's the method that we're going to use today to not only clone our own army, but also help you get that iGCSE. Right. This is the biggest slide of the whole lesson, but I urge you to stay with me. Listen, if you learn nothing else this entire lesson, you learn this slide, and I mean that. This comes up so often in exams, I recommend memorizing it. You must get together in your head a really good set of instructions, a good method for cloning a mammal like Dolly the sheep. I've written an example and it's in the yellow box, and this would be pretty much what would be expected from you. Something like this would be expected from you from an exam question. Quite often it's accompanied by a diagram like the one I've shown as well. Sometimes they shake it up a little bit, but if you're familiar with this one and you're familiar with your model answer, you've practiced it, you've practiced those instructions, you should get some easy marks here because it comes up quite a lot. I'm going to go through it slowly, try to follow the diagram rather than follow the yellow box, and I'm going to go through it one by one
So look at the numbers as I go through the diagram. So number 1, you start by choosing who you want to clone, and you take one of their adult diploid cells. From this cell, you remove the nucleus, that protective bag that contained all the DNA. You do this because you only want the DNA. You don't need the rest of the cell. It's rubbish, it's waste. So you take out that nucleus that contains all the DNA of that sheep. You then put this nucleus into an egg cell which just had the nucleus taken away. So we've got an egg cell with no nucleus and a nucleus. When a cell, any cell, has had a nucleus taken out of it, so it doesn't have a nucleus anymore, we call it enucleated. This is a key word for your iGCSE. I recommend you jotting that down and you remembering it. Enucleated, a cell without a nucleus. So we've got a nucleus from our donor, a nucleus from the thing that we want to clone. We have an egg cell that doesn't have a nucleus, and we stick them together. And the thing that kind of fuses them together is an electric shock. We give it an electric shock, so I'm 1.2 now. And not only does this electric shock kind of fuse these two things together, it also kickstarts it into dividing more and becoming a baby, becoming an embryo, which brings me to point 3. So we now have a growing baby. When it's a ball of cells, we call it an embryo. And we put it into the tummy, the womb, of a surrogate mum. This surrogate mum's then going to carry this embryo around, carry this baby around, feed it, keep it safe until it's ready to be born, and then we have our clone. Voila, you just made it. If you're struggling with understanding the instructions for making a clone the way I've just explained it, you need to find a way of getting it in. I've posted some videos on the Southwest Science School Facebook page. They should be there now. They might go through it in a slightly different way to me. They might say it a slightly different way, which might help you take it in better. So, if you've had trouble with what I've just said there, then check those out on the Facebook page. Before Dolly, we had cloned some small animals like frogs, but why they didn't become as famous as she did was because Dolly was cloned from an adult cell. The others were cloned from embryo cells. Embryos are a baby before it reaches 12 weeks old. So it's basically a tiny mass, a ball of cells in your mum's tummy. So all of the animals before Dolly were cloned from these cells. Dolly was cloned from an adult cell. This may not sound that cool, but it really is truly amazing. It basically means that you could clone your gran or your granddad now and play with them as children. As far as your iGCSE is concerned, you need to know this distinction. You must be able to say Dolly was cloned from an adult cell, not an embryo. This brings us nicely to ethics. Is cloning ethical? Is it moral? Do you think it's right? And should we even be doing it?
How do you think you'd feel if you were a clone? Do you think you'd be happy about it? I'd like you to watch this video. It's by the New York Times and there should be a link to it. You should be able to play it below, just below this video right now. So pause this one and I'd like you to watch it and write down all the reasons why cloning mammals might be considered unethical or immoral, all the reasons why some people might think cloning is wrong. Pause this video and then when you've done that, restart. Hopefully you've now watched the video about Dolly and you have an idea about some of the ethical issues surrounding cloning, some of the things that might be upsetting people about it. I've written what I found out from the video, but it's more than possible that you found more, and there are so many examples you could have given that aren't even on that video. I think the main reason people fear cloning is because they believe it's playing God
or we're pretending to be God by creating living things. It is completely up to you whether you agree with that or not. And I really do recommend chatting to people around you to see what they think. But let's be honest, there are some downright scary things that could happen if cloning was just a free-for-all. In the hands of an evil dictator like Hitler, we could end up with thousands of him roaming the earth. We could even resurrect him from the dead. Or what about the health effects on clones? Cloning has a really low success rate. For every healthy clone, there are literally hundreds of deformed and disabled ones. Say we made human clones for like spare parts for humans. If you needed a new organ or a new limb, how would the clone feel? Clone armies are also a concern for many people. The topic of this very lesson, it actually would be possible to create one very much like the Star Wars clone army. Well, scientifically it would be. We are more than capable of cloning humans for an army. There is of course that tiny little problem that it's completely illegal. But if you're an evil mastermind, you don't need to listen to the law. Right, you literally have everything that you need to clone your army. I mean, you just take that model answer, you take that answer that's been put in a yellow box in all the previous slides. The model answer tells you how to clone a mammal. It's exactly how Dolly was cloned, and you apply it to your clone army. Now, in Star Wars, they cloned Jango Fett. I don't know whether you know that, but he was the bounty hunter. And then they cloned millions of him in these little pods. And that's probably the only thing that's really going to be difficult for you now to clone your army. You know the method that you have to do it. You follow the instructions that you've learned to have a clone. You know, you take the nucleus from Jango Fett, you take an enucleated cell from a female egg cell, you stick them together with an electric shock. The problem is you're going to need to put it in a surrogate mum. That's the issue. So we're going to need to learn a little bit more about what that surrogate mum actually does. In Star Wars, they used sort of pods that pretended to be a womb, pretended to be a surrogate mum. But we need for your GCSE just to know that little bit more about what job the surrogate mum plays in making a clone. So there are two things that are really important that your surrogate mother is going to provide for your clone. And these are the two things that you're going to need for your iGCSE. The surrogate mother is going to provide protection for your clone in the womb via something called amniotic fluid. A protective fluid, a buffer to prevent it from getting hurt or knocked. And then she's also going to provide a placenta, because this baby is going to need nutrition, it's going to need food. Now the placenta doesn't actually provide the food, the mother eats the food, so the placenta acts as a tool to pass food from the mother to the clone, to the baby. So in your clone army, you know all of the method to make a clone, but you're going to have to think how you're artificially going to recreate this environment. I mean, you could have millions of mums all waddling around. That's absolutely fine if that's what you choose. But most of the sort of films in Star Wars, they do use these sort of pod things, like in the Matrix, growing chambers. So you need to find a way of, in your pod, creating a amniotic fluid for protection and a way of providing nutrition for the clone via a sort of placenta. Right, we have learned an awful lot. Do not underestimate what has just been covered. So what I thought I'd do is we'd do a little learning check so you can not get carried away and you understand what you're going to need for this iGCSE, what you're going to need, what the facts you're going to need for the exam. So what I'd like you to do is pause this video, complete the crossword which is on this slide, and then restart it, and I'll go through the answers with you on the next slide. Hopefully you've had a go and not found this too difficult. I'm going to go through the crosses first, the across questions, and then I'll go down the down questions. So I'd just like to say, actually, these are all potential exam questions. So if you do learn them and keep going over them, you're in a really good state. Right, an example of a clone in nature is a twin, an identical twin to be precise. So remember, the definition of a clone is something that is genetically identical to something else. And identical twins are just that. They're genetically identical. Next one. Do clones have one or two parents? They have one. This is because they are the result of asexual reproduction. Remember that, asexual reproduction from one parent, from one diploid cell. And that diploid cell contains all the information that they would need to make a clone, so the clone only has one parent. Next question, across 7. The definition of something without a nucleus is the word enucleated. When a cell does not have a nucleus, we call it enucleated. Next one, across 8. The fluid that is required to protect a fetus or embryo in the womb is amniotic fluid. It's so important to have amniotic fluid in the womb. And actually, when mothers don't have this, or they don't have enough of this, sorry, they do always have it, but they don't have enough, it can cause real problems actually in the pregnancy. So amniotic fluid. I'm going to move on to the down questions now. Was Dolly cloned from a diploid or a haploid cell? Dolly had one parent and was a complete copy of that parent, so she was copied from a diploid cell, a cell that has all the genetic material in one, not half the genetic material like a sperm or an egg. Okay, next question, down 3. A genetic replica of a parent organism, so a genetic replica of a parent, is a clone. That should be fairly obvious now. Clones are genetically identical. They have the same DNA. The next question is down 4. Was Dolly cloned from an adult cell or an embryo? Dolly was cloned from an adult cell. That's what made her so special. It was like taking a cell from your mum and making a clone baby of her again, just with a sheep, of course. So the answer to that one is adult cell. And finally, the last question, down 5, is an organ that provides nutrients to a growing baby in the womb is a placenta. It doesn't actually supply the nutrients itself. The mother does that when she eats, but it provides the tool to pass these nutrients, pass this food on to the baby. If you keep practicing that crossword, you are in a good stead for knowing the cloning basics. I've added a copy of it into your assignment pack for this week, so you can keep going through that if you want to. And as I've said before, this is examples of practice exam questions that we've seen in the past. Okay. However, if you learn nothing else, please learn what is in this yellow box. Please learn the model exam answer to how to clone a mammal. The exam will more often than not refer to Dolly the sheep, but occasionally they have referred to other animals, and it really doesn't matter. The same process will always apply to any mammal. You take a nucleus from something you want to clone, you take a nucleus from some mammal, you put it in an enucleated egg, you give it a kickstart with an electric shock, and you stick it in a surrogate mum to grow and be born. Right, there's one more thing. It is worth noting before we go, as a little tip, most of the time we say Dolly was cloned from an adult cell, but in the past, exams have been known to call it a mature cell. It's exactly the same thing. Don't let it worry you. Adult cell, mature cell. As far as the iGCSE is concerned, it's the same thing. Okay, I've given you all the information that you need so you can make your clone army. I'd like you to design the machine that's going to do this for you, the machine that is going to make a clone army. Give some thought to this, take some time and try to have fun with it. You know the method for cloning a mammal. We've said it several times, it's on several previous slides, it's that same instructions in that yellow box that you need to drum in for that exam. How to clone a mammal. The instructions are the same, doesn't matter what you're cloning, the instructions are the same. So try designing your machine. It would be great if you could share a picture with us and put it on Facebook or Twitter. I'd personally love to see it, but it's totally up to you. Right, before you begin, remember your cloning machine needs to make an army, so it needs to make lots and lots of clones, but it needs to make them from one parent, one organism. In Star Wars, that was the bounty hunter Jango Fett, but yours can be absolutely anyone or anything as long as it's mammalish. Your machine needs a surrogate mother of some sort. Okay, so even if you don't actually have a mother and you have like a pod or something like in Star Wars, that surrogate needs to have a womb with amniotic fluid and a placenta. Okay, so I've come up with a really basic machine. I'm sure yours will be a million times better, but I'm going to explain it to you now so you kind of get the idea of what I'm asking from this exercise 2 from this lesson. So to make my clone army, I steal millions of eggs from famous women, famous celebrities across the world, and I enucleate them. I take the nucleus out, or I get my team of scientists to take the nuclei out of all these famous women's eggs. And then I'm not very imaginative and I don't want to fix something that's not broken, so I'm going to use an adult cell from Jango Fett, just like in Star Wars. I take a cell out of him and I take the nucleus out of that cell. That's all the ingredients. So my machine, which I'm going to move on to the next page and show you, looks a little bit something like this. So I've got this sort of conveyor belt. I stick my enucleated egg onto the conveyor belt. As it moves along, it gets injected with Jango Fett's nucleus full of his DNA. It moves along the conveyor belt a little bit more and then gets blasted with an electric shock, which jolts it into dividing and growing and turning into a little Jango Fett embryo. A bit further down, the Jango clone embryo moves into a pod, which I've specially made, which contains an artificial amniotic fluid and a needle that sticks into the cell, sticks into the embryo, which is attached to a tube, which gives it a good nutrient supply. And that's sort of like my placenta for my clone. And my clone's going to stay there, my Jango Fett's going to stay there until it grows. I decide not to let it out, to be honest, until it's an adult, and then I don't have to think about how I'm going to deal with all these Jango Fetts running around. So my pod, my womb, actually holds the clone until it's fully grown and I want it to come out. And I make sure the placenta can cope with feeding an adult, feeding him to this point. So then when Jango is ready, when my clone is ready, before I let him out, I'm going to take an adult cell from him and then I'm going to start again. Now, this method, as you've probably guessed, is a bit long-winded. I'm wondering if I should have changed it so I could have done sort of loads at the same time, maybe taken lots of cells, lots of diploid cells from Jango the first time and then just had thousands of conveyor belts all doing this, but it doesn't really matter really, it's up to you. Maybe you could improve on what I'm doing. There's loads more ideas and I look forward to seeing them if you're willing to share them. Right, so we have discovered that yes, it is completely possible to grow your own army in this day and age with the science that we have available to us right now. You have officially reached the end of what you have to learn this lesson, so well done. At this point, every lesson, I will show a slide. There'll be a slide that I call an exam summary sheet. I'm rarely going to read through it because I'll have already said it a million times in the lesson. But what I would like you to do is print it off, just this slide, every lesson, and store it for revision. These exam summary sheets contain a really good detailed overview of everything you need to pass the exam. I'm hoping that as you get through the lessons and your sort of pile of exam summary sheets grow, you can then use them as revision cards or flashcards to revise the really important things for your exam. If you collect all these exam summary sheets, and at the end of your course when you're revising, you make sure you keep going through them all and learning all of the facts, you will know all of the content to get a top grade in your iGCSE. After the exam summary sheet, I will always go through some exam questions. In fact, we go through that many exam questions, you'll practically have done every past paper there is at the end of this course. The reason I do this is because the exams can be really odd. I kid you not, you can learn the course content word for word and still not do very well. And I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want you working as hard as you can and then coming out of an exam thinking, well, what was that about? It was a fail. So I go through exam questions because it is the only way to get a feel for how they word things. In fact, I think practicing past papers is so important. I also include more questions in your assignment sheets. So every week we go through some together in the lesson, and then you'll go on to do even more on your own in the assignments. So here is your first for this week. Have a go. The number in brackets I've circled, it's in red, is how many marks are available in the question. Look at this. It will tell you how much time and energy you should devote to an answer. So when you're in your exam, have a little look at it. This one is worth 5 marks. So I can tell you now, the examiner is going to be expecting 5 points, 5 different things that they can give a little tick next to give you full marks, okay? So have a go. Describe the stages in the production of cloned mammals such as Dolly the sheep. Make sure you pause the lesson, as in the next slide I'm going to go through a model answer with you. So I'm hoping that you realise this was what we've been trying to drum into you the whole lesson. This was the answer that I was looking for. It's the standard set of instructions for cloning a mammal, the method you use to clone your army. So I've highlighted the points that would potentially get you marks. It doesn't really matter how you write the answer down, just don't, if you go on and on and on, you're going to lose time. But just get a rough copy of the model answer that I've stuck in yellow boxes throughout this whole lesson, and you'll be fine. I wouldn't worry too much about getting the word organism in there or the word species. Just get the things down that I've underlined if you can. I've chosen this past exam question because it shows that although Dolly the sheep is the main animal, the main mammal that gets asked in past exam papers or in exam papers in general, it's not unheard of for them to use a different animal. Here they've used the Siberian tiger, but it really doesn't matter what mammal they use. The facts are exactly the same. So fill in the blanks, give it a go. Pause, and then in the next slide I'll give you the answers. Right, I did not like this question at all, and that's why I put it up. I wouldn't be surprised if you get questions in the exam that even though you know the material like the back of your hand, they make you wonder what the examiner even wants you to write. So let's go through this and just see what you got. A nucleus is taken from a body cell of an adult Siberian tiger. Okay, this is a really odd way of phrasing this, a body cell. I think what you have to remember here is, as I said earlier, they want you to understand above all else that Dolly came from an adult diploid cell. She didn't come from an embryo. She didn't come from a haploid cell like a sperm or an egg. She came from a diploid adult cell, and these generally are in your body. So they were looking for the word cell here, or even better would have been if you could put diploid cell in, but the actual answer they were looking for was cell. This nucleus is put into an enucleated egg. Okay, that seems fairly simple. That one seems actually fairly obvious. The cell is given a mild electric shock to help it divide by a type of cell division called mitosis. I would be shocked if you'd got this, because we haven't actually gone through it yet. If you enroll on the iGCSE biology course, you will learn all about mitosis before this lesson, but it's just a bit too difficult to go into for now. So don't worry if you didn't get that one at all. A ball of cells is produced called an embryo. You may have got that one. That's fairly set in stone in our method, in our instructions for making a clone. But basically, any unborn human that's under 12 weeks old is an embryo. So, you know, in that really early stages of a fetus, of a baby growing, we call it an embryo. The ball of cells is placed into the womb, and then the tiger is called a surrogate mother. Them two again, I would have thought you'd get all right then. I think they'd be fine. But just looking at this question, especially the first answer, you can see how obscure things can be worded sometimes. So I recommend keep reading this one, and just when you have a spare moment, go over it again if possible. So well done, you have completed the entire trial lesson. This is a really good example of the amount and the content that would be involved in a week's worth of work doing the iGCSE with us over 2 years, including school holidays. So with this pack, you've also got another file, another document that's called assignments, an assignment sheet, and on it there'll be quite a few different activities or assignments that you can do that are going to hopefully really cement everything that you've done today and help you learn it. If you've purchased full teacher support, then all of the assignments that you want feedback on, that you want marked, I'd appreciate if you could normally submit them by the following Friday by 6 p.m. and you can do that by email, and then I'll mark them and get them back to you. And then during the week, check out the Facebook and the Twitter. I'm going to be posting videos and articles and activities and all sorts of things that are going to really help you learn about what we did this lesson. So this week it'll be cloning. And then any questions you have, check out our forum, go to the Facebook private group, go to the chat room and chat with each other and see, you know, if you can help each other if you're in trouble. If you're still interested in completing your iGCSE with me, my name's Jo and I'll be your teacher. I gained 3 degrees in various science subjects before I completed a PGCE from King's College London in 2013. I have experience teaching secondary science, tutoring, GCSE, iGCSE and A-level, and I've worked in research as well. And I'm really excited to get to know you all more and see what interests you and what you'd like to do with your lives. I currently home educate my own 4 children, so I understand, you know, the highs and lows of home education. And if you have any questions about the course or about me, please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.